I worked the night shift at a busy hospital. I had been a nurse for almost a decade. Usually, I liked the quiet of the nights. It was a chance to help patients without the chaos of the day. But a few weeks ago, something happened that I still can't shake off. It started just like any other night. I made my rounds and checked medications. Machines beeped softly in the background. On my third shift, I noticed a patient in room 204. He had a lot of visitors, but they came at odd hours. They whispered as they moved in and out. I thought maybe it was a close-knit family, but it felt strange to me. Over the next few nights, things got weirder. I heard laughter, children's laughter. It came from room 204, but I was sure the patient was an elderly man. I tried to ignore it, focused on my work, but the laughter kept creeping in. It bounced off the sterile walls. My heart raced whenever I walked past that room. Then one night, the whispers got louder. I felt a chill run down my spine. I thought I could almost make out words. They felt urgent, but I couldn't understand them. I tightened my grip on my clipboard and approached the door. I almost knocked, but another nurse walked by. "Hey, what's with all the visitors in 204?" I asked her. She shrugged. "I don't know, just family, I guess." But her eyes darted back to the room, and I saw doubt there. I felt uneasy, like she knew something I didn't. I stepped back and continued my shift, but that feeling settled in my chest. One night, I stood at the nurse's station, filling out charts. A patient called for help from down the hall. I went to assist him. As I did, I thought I saw a shadow moving near room 204. I turned to look, but nothing was there. Fear and curiosity clawed at me. Hours later, I returned to 204. The door was slightly open. I hesitated, then pushed it open. The room was empty except for the patient. He stared blankly at the ceiling. The laughter and whispers were gone. It felt wrong. I backed out, unease settling in deeper. What had happened? I didn't understand it. As I left his room, I glanced back one last time. That's when I heard it, a child's giggle, light and airy. My heart raced. I spun around, but nothing was there. Then a voice whispered from the shadows, "Why are you here?" I froze, breath caught in my throat. I turned back to the room. The patient was still staring, but now a shadow blocked the door. I quickly shut the door. Was I meant to see something? I felt like they were waiting for me. The laughter returned, echoing in my mind. Each night since then, I've been haunted by those moments. I just can't forget room 204. The night after I heard that voice, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I tried to focus on my tasks, but my mind kept drifting back to room 204. I was restless. Every shift felt heavier, more charged. As I walked the dimly lit hallways that night, I caught sight of a small gathering outside room 204 again. But this time, it was different. There were more voices, and they sounded frantic. I strained to hear what they were saying. "Don't know how much longer he can hold on," one voice cracked, filled with fear. Another whispered, "We can't let him go. He promised." My heart pounded. Promised what? I squeezed my eyes shut and fought the urge to turn and run. I felt like a bystander in a scene I shouldn't be witnessing. I stepped closer to the door, driven by an instinct I couldn't ignore. I pushed it open slightly, just enough to peek inside. The elderly man lay on the bed, the faint sounds of machines surrounding him. But there was something else, a glow emanating from the corner of the room. It flickered like candlelight, casting shadows that danced across the walls. My breath hitched. Then I saw them. They were small, indistinct figures, shimmering in the light. I blinked, hoping my eyes were playing tricks on me. But they didn't disappear. I couldn't make out distinct shapes, but the way they moved felt alive. They swirled around the man, whispering urgently. I quickly stepped back and bumped into the wall. The echoes of laughter returned, mingling with the whispers. My pulse quickened. What was happening in there? I needed answers. Suddenly, I felt a presence behind me. I turned, but nobody was there. I rushed down the hallway, eyes darting. The patients seemed to sense the unease too, looking out from their rooms with wary eyes. I found myself standing by the nurse's station, trying to catch my breath. Another nurse, Amy, noticed me. "You okay? You look pale." I'm fine," I stammered. "Just feeling off tonight." She raised an eyebrow, not convinced. "That room is weird. I've heard things too." "What do you mean?" I asked, my interest piqued. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "You know the stories, right? About the man in 204? They say he can see things from beyond. Some believe he communicates with them." The idea sent chills down my spine. I had sensed it, but hearing it out loud made it more real. "Who are they?" I whispered. Amy shrugged. "No one really knows, but people say the kids come to visit him. They think he's close to the end." Kids? I couldn't believe it. Then, with a sudden rush of intuition, I asked, "What happens when he passes?" Her face paled. "It's said they take him. He won't be alone." My stomach dropped. I couldn't fathom it. A feeling of dread washed over me. This was beyond anything I had ever experienced at the hospital. That's when I noticed the lights flicker above us. Everything went dark. A cold breath of air wrapped around me. My heart raced as I held my breath. Then, without warning, the laughter echoed louder than ever, filling the halls. When the lights flickered back to life, I knew I had to go back to room 204. There was no escaping this anymore. I needed to confront whatever was waiting for me there. The moment I stepped into room 204, the air felt charged. The unsettling glow was still there, casting pale light on the man in the bed. The small figures were gone, but the whispers lingered, filling my ears with a melody I couldn't quite catch. I made my way inside, cautious of what I would find. "What are you doing?" I jumped at the sudden voice. It was Amy, her expression a mix of concern and fear. "I needed to see for myself," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. You don't know what's in here," she warned, stepping closer. Just then, the machines next to the man began to beep erratically. I turned to look at him. His eyes were open, but they seemed distant, as though he were staring right through me. I felt a chill. Whatever connection he had with those figures, it was still there, pulling him towards something. I stepped back involuntarily. Then I saw it, a shadow creeping along the walls, growing closer. My heart raced as I watched it stretch unnaturally, moving in a way that didn't belong. It was dark, a stark contrast to the glow, and it seemed to pulse with an energy of its own. "Let's go," Amy urged, but I couldn't tear my gaze away. I could sense something profound was happening. I needed to understand, even if it terrified me. "Just a second," I said, but my voice was shaky. The shadows began to sway, and the whispers started to transform into coherent words. "Help him, he promised," they echoed. The echoes bounced between us, fueling my confusion. "Help who?" I blurted out, eyes darting between Amy and the man. But the moment I questioned, I felt a prickling at the back of my neck. Something was coming, something heavy and ancient. The man in the bed drew a shaky breath. "They're coming for me," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "The children, I can't let them take me." My breath hitched. "Take you where?" But before he could answer, the temperature in the room plummeted. I could see my breath steam in the air. I stumbled back, my gaze fixed on the shadow as it lurched closer. Panic surged through me. Then, just as suddenly, the power flickered again. The room darkened, save for that unsettling glow. I felt something brushing against my arm. I looked to Amy, but she had frozen in shock, staring at the shadow that fused with the glow, creating an eerie spectacle. "Don't look away," Amy suddenly yelled, breaking the spell. But it was too late. The shadow melded with the light, and the man in the bed began to convulse, the machines shrieking with alarm. I charged forward, desperate to help him, but the glow intensified, blinding me. When my vision cleared, the man was still. Everything in the room felt different, as if time had warped. The whispers had gone silent. I scanned the room, searching for any sign of the kids, but they were gone. Instead, I found Amy trembling beside me. What just happened? I don't know, I stuttered, but something is wrong. We need to find out what he promised. As I stepped back, I noticed a small paper beside the bed fluttering in the breeze. I reached for it. That's when I saw it. An outline drawing of children's faces smiling back at me. I pulled away in horror. Now I had questions swirling even faster than before, and I knew I had to find answers. But whatever this was, it wasn't finished with me yet. I took a deep breath to steady myself, but it barely helped. The drawing of the children haunted me. I felt like I was looking at a piece of the past, something dark and tangled. "What do we do now?" Amy whispered, her voice trembling. The fear in her eyes mirrored mine. We couldn't just stand there doing nothing. I glanced at the man in the bed again. He was still, the machines now eerily quiet. But that didn't mean he was safe. "Let's check the charts," I decided, trying to sound brave. That might give us some insight into his condition, and maybe the connection with the kids. We fumbled for the clipboard hanging by the bed, and I skimmed through the paperwork. His name was Richard Holt. There were notes jotted down about hallucinations, but nothing about children or any promise. My heart sank. It felt like a dead end. "What if he was trying to protect them?" Amy asked, glancing back at Richard. "What if they really were in danger?" A horrible thought crossed my mind. I remembered those shadows. They hadn't felt friendly. I turned sharply towards the door. "We need to find the nurse. Maybe she knows something." Just as we started to leave, a low rumble filled the room. My stomach dropped as a heavy thud echoed from the hallway, the sound of footsteps. My pulse quickened. Who could it be at this hour? Then the door swung open, and a woman in scrubs stepped in, her expression fraught with urgency. "You can't be in here. This isn't safe." "Amy and I were just—" I began, but she cut me off. "Get out, now," she insisted, her eyes darting nervously. I turned to Amy, her expression morphing from confusion to alarm. "What's going on?" I asked, but I could feel it, that sense that time was running out. The nurse grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the door. "There's been a breach. You two shouldn't be in this wing." I glanced at Richard, fear gripping me. But what about him? "There's nothing you can do," she shouted, and the urgency in her voice sent a shiver through me. Before I could protest, she pushed us out into the hallway. The atmosphere changed. The eerie glow in room 204 faded behind us, but a lingering darkness wrapped around the corridor. The lights overhead flickered, and a sense of dread crept back in. "What breach?" Amy whispered, her body rigid beside me. I didn't have an answer. I wanted to know where those shadowy figures had gone. Were they alive, waiting? I shook my head to clear it. I couldn't let myself think like that. Then a scream shattered the silence. It came from the direction of the rooms we just left. Every hair on my body stood on end as I fought the urge to run back. "We need to get help," I said. But before we could move, the shadows began to swirl in front of us, taking shape once more. I stared in horror as the outlines of children materialized, their cheerful faces now twisted with fear. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't over, and for some reason, I felt like it had only just begun. "Run!" I shouted, but the shadows lunged ahead, blocking our escape. My heart pounded in my ears, louder than the chaos around us. As I struggled to make sense of it all, something brushed against my cheek. A whisper I almost recognized, echoing in the chaos. Time to make a choice. But whatever lay ahead, I knew I'd be facing it fast. I didn't wait for another moment. I grabbed Amy's hand and we sprinted down the hallway, the pounding of our feet echoing against the sterile tiles. The shadows danced behind us, their shapes shifting like a nightmare come to life. I could feel their energy creeping closer, pulling on my thoughts, tightening the grip of fear around my heart. "Where do we go?" Amy cried, her voice breaking. Panic surged within me. I had no plan. All I knew was that we had to get away. I yanked her towards a side corridor, hoping to find an exit or at least somewhere to hide. As we turned the corner, the lights flickered again, casting long, twisting shadows that seemed to stretch toward us like grasping hands. "Please, please, let us find someone," I muttered under my breath, my own voice sounding desperate and small. Ahead, I spotted a window at the end of the hallway. It was partially open, and I took a chance, darting toward it while dragging Amy along. If we could just get outside, the fresh air would clear our heads. It had to be better than this nightmare. But as we approached, I heard a guttural scrape behind us. Instinct kicked in, and I glanced back. The shadows rushed nearer, coalescing into darker forms, their faces twisted and eyes hollow. They were coming for us, and we were out of time. "Help!" I screamed as we reached the window, but the sound felt trapped in my throat, drowning in my fear. With one swift motion, I pushed the window open wider. "Climb out," I urged Amy, but she hesitated, glancing back. "We don't have time." My heart raced as I scrambled up to the edge. That's when I saw it. A flicker of movement in the opposite direction, a figure standing just beyond the flickering lights. The nurse we'd seen earlier was there, looking frantic, scanning the corridor. "Get away!" she shouted, her voice slicing through the thick atmosphere of terror. "Over here!" I yelled, but Amy grabbed my arm, her grip firm. "We can't leave her." The shadow forms twisted into a more defined shape, and I realized they were reaching for the nurse. I could see now that they were children, pale and hollowed, but their energy crackled with something dark. "No!" I yelled, fighting against Amy's hold, but the shadows surged forward, engulfing the nurse. I turned back to the window, climbing through with desperation. The fear of being caught overwhelmed the weight of my guilt. I could hear the nurse's screams, and it tore at my heart, but I had to save us. On the other side, I landed hard on the ground outside. The night air was sharp and cool, but I couldn't linger. I pushed myself to run, dragging Amy along. I had no idea what had happened to the nurse or where the shadows had gone, but everything felt darker behind us. "Where do we go now?" Amy panted, panic in her voice as we stumbled forward. "Anywhere but here," I replied, glancing back towards the hospital. The building loomed like a monster in the night, and the dread settled in my chest. Then I saw something glimmering on the ground. I stopped. It was a drawing, similar to the ones I had seen before, but this one felt different. It was smeared, as if someone had grabbed it in a hurry. As I reached down to pick it up, the air changed. I could feel the shadows stirring again. They hadn't given up. I glanced at Amy, feeling that we were not done yet. Then I heard it, a whisper. "Help us." I froze, and the weight of the night bore down on me again. I staggered back at the sound of the whisper, my heart racing. "Did you hear that?" I asked Amy, who had also gone pale. The night felt alive, humming with an energy that made the hair on my arms stand on end. "Yeah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It sounded like, 'Help us.'" The voice called again, more desperate this time, echoing around us. It slept through the cracks of the night, wrapping around my mind like a vine. "Let's go," I urged, tightening my grip on the drawing. I was already moving, dragging Amy along, but I could feel my resolve slipping. What if we can help them?" "No," Amy shouted, suddenly pulling away from me. "We can't. We need to get out of here." Confusion flickered within me, mixed with fear. This place wasn't normal. The shadows, the whispers, they were all signs of something wrong. But those voices sounded human, like lost children needing rescue. Before I could argue,
A chilling breeze swept across the field, blowing the drawing from my hand. No! I lunged for it, but it danced away, carried by the wind, and soon disappeared into the night. "Forget it," Amy yelled, fear igniting her voice as she stepped back. "We need to go." Suddenly, the shadows seeped from the trees, creeping toward us. I could see dark figures solidifying, the same hollowed faces I'd glimpsed before. They emerged from the darkness, their expressions marred by anguish. "Help us!" they cried again, the sound blending with the wind, creating an unsettling chorus. I wanted to scream, but my throat felt constricted. "We need to run," I urged again, but my feet felt stuck in place. My mind raced back to the nurse, her panic, her attempt to save us from something we couldn't grasp. What had happened to her? The shadows lunged, but instead of fear, a wave of sadness washed over me. Were they trapped? Were they seeking help? But as they reached out, I felt only pain, the kind that wrapped around my heart and tugged me into their cold, dark world. "Come on!" Amy's voice cut through my daze, finally pulling me back to the present. She grabbed my arm, and together we broke into a sprint, weaving through the trees as the shadows clawed at our backs. "Where do we go?" I gasped, my legs burning. "I don't know," she shrieked, glancing over her shoulder. "Just run." I ran until I could barely breathe, but with each step, the whispers chased us, echoing our name. Panic welled up within me. I felt trapped, as if the forest had turned into a labyrinth, each turn leading us deeper into despair. Then, out of the shadows, I caught sight of a small structure. "There!" I pointed, barely able to get the words out. "Let's check that out." We bolted toward it, nearly crashing into the door. I rattled the handle, hoping it wasn't locked. It creaked open, revealing an empty room lined with old, faded photographs. "Is anyone in here?" I called, the question barely escaping my lips before the door creaked shut behind us. The sound echoed ominously in the silence. I spun around, but before I could speak, another whisper slithered through the air. "You found us." A shiver rolled down my spine. I barely had time to react as more shadows began to gather at the periphery of the room, their hollow eyes focused on us. I knew I had to find a way out, but now we were trapped. My heart pounded as the shadows loomed closer, swirling around us like a storm, their desperate faces mirroring the anguish I felt building inside me. "What do we do?" I whispered, scanning the empty room for an escape route. Amy pressed close to me, her breath shaky. "We need to get out, now!" Her voice was laced with urgency, yet she seemed frozen, just like me. I could see the terror in her eyes, an echo of the fear I was feeling. As if sensing our panic, the shadows edged forward. "Help us," they murmured again, their voices blending into a sinister lullaby. "No!" I yelled out instinctively. I couldn't allow myself to believe that they might be reaching out for help. Not now. I darted to the side, looking for another door or a window, anything. The photographs on the walls caught my attention. They were portraits of smiling people, their faces flickering in my memory, as if I should recognize them. I was struck by a thought. What if they were the lost souls trapped by whatever cursed this place? Then everything shifted. A loud crash echoed behind me as one of the shadows collided with a stack of wooden crates, sending them tumbling across the floor. I jumped at the noise, adrenaline surging through me. "We have to move," I shouted again, grabbing Amy's arm. We rushed toward the far wall, stumbling over the debris. Just then, flickering lights overhead blinked on and off, creating an inescapable strode effect that disoriented me. With each flicker, I thought I saw flashes of movement among the shadows, faces shifting, eyes pleading for release. "Over here," Amy shouted, spotting a narrow window at the back of the room. It was too small for either of us to fit through,
but it might provide a glimpse of what lay outside. I pulled her towards it. The whispers intensified, a desperate crescendo filling the air. "Help us! Help!" Their cries clawed at my mind, intertwining with my own fear. "Stop it!" I screamed, too overwhelmed by the rising panic. My heart raced louder than the voices. "We need to find a way out." Then I saw it, a beam of light slicing through the darkness on the other side of the room. It flickered gently, beckoning to us. "Look," I pointed, "that way. It must lead outside." We pivoted and dashed towards the light. As we approached, we were met with an ancient door, covered in dust, but slightly ajar, the glow spilling out like an invitation. My fingers brushed against the doorknob, but hesitation seized me again. "Amy, we can't just—" I hesitated, glancing back at the shadows closing in. They seemed almost desperate now, their cries growing more frantic. "We can't just leave them." "Are you kidding? We have to go." Her voice cut through the chaos, grounding me just enough to push through the fear. With a nod, we threw open the door, and bright light poured into the room, momentarily blinding me. But I could hear the shadows wailing behind us, the sound filling the air as we stepped into the unknown. "Just run," I urged, adrenaline fueling my movements. But the moment we crossed the threshold, I felt something solid behind us, an unseen force anchoring me back. "Let go!" I yelled, but the door slammed shut too quickly. I turned, realizing the shadows had followed, their cries dampening as everything went dark. "Someone's here," a new voice echoed in the void, deep and commanding. My breath hitched.
I spun around, heart racing again. The shadows shifted, forming a figure on the other side of the door. "You're not safe." And just like that, my world slipped further into uncertainty. The ground felt unstable as I grappled with the figure's warning. Panic surged through me, but a strange calmness settled over Amy. She pulled me back slightly, her eyes narrowing on the shadowy presence. "Who are you?" I blurted out, my voice barely more than a whisper. The figure took a step forward, its form shifting like smoke, outlining a face that seemed both familiar and foreign. "You shouldn't have come here," it said, its tone both chilling and sorrowful. Suddenly, memories flooded into my mind, faces of people I had loved, each one lost in time. Before I had a chance to process it, the darkness thickened, enveloping us again. I strained my eyes, attempting to see through the shadows, but the light from the door behind us flickered and died, plunging us into deeper darkness. "Stay close," I urged Amy, my hand clutching hers tightly. We had to find a way back. The silence stretched before us, oppressive and heavy. Then I heard a faint whisper, clearer than before. "Help us, please." My heart sank as I turned in the direction of the voice, my instinct screaming at me to ignore it, but I couldn't. Something was drawing me in. "Do you hear that?" I asked, searching Amy's face. "Yes, but we can't," she started, but I interrupted her. "Maybe they know how to escape," I said, my feet moving of their own accord. "We can't just leave them." Before Amy could protest, I followed the sound, pushing through the tangled shadows. The whispers lured me in like a moth to a flame, fear pushing me forward despite the danger lurking in the dark. The shadows began to part, revealing a dimly lit corridor. Old wooden walls seemed to breathe around us, creaking softly as if alive. Images flickered in the corners of my vision, grief-stricken faces, silent pleas for help. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. These weren't just shadows. They were the souls trapped in this cursed place, much like the glimpses from the photographs. Then, from behind us, the commanding voice returned, booming through the corridor, finally breaking the trance. "Leave now, or be consumed by their pain." I felt Amy's grip tighten on my arm, pulling me back. "We need to go back, now!" she cried, her voice shaking with fear. "No, Amy, we can't just turn away from this," I shouted back. "I have to know." But before I could argue further, the shadows lunged at me, coiling around my legs and pulling me down. "Help us!" the voices rang out in a frantic chorus, drowning out my thoughts. I fought against their grip, panic clawing at my throat. "Let me go!" Everything around us was spinning, and the desperation of the shadows seeped into my bones. Then, in a sudden flash, I saw flashes of what could have been: children laughing, families united, lives lived in joy. I gasped, feeling a surge of compassion. "I won't abandon you!" I yelled into the void. But just as the shadows tightened their hold, the floor beneath us shifted, and a blinding light erupted in front of me. "You need to choose," came a voice, sharper and clearer now. Then everything went dark again, but this time I could feel a weight hovering above me. I summoned every ounce of strength and jolted upright, searching desperately for Amy, for any sign of hope. My chest tightened as I realized this was not a dream, and the choices I made here would determine our fate. "Let's find a way out," I said finally, my voice firm despite the chaos around us. It felt like the only option, but a deep, gnawing fear reminded me. The shadows were still watching, and they wouldn't let us go easily. I took a deep breath, feeling the pulses of the darkness around us. "This way," I called out, pointing ahead into the corridor, uncertain but resolute. We moved forward, and the whispers intensified, creating a chaotic symphony that filled my ears, sending shivers down my spine. As I stumbled ahead, shadows flickered along the walls. They showed glimpses of past memories circling around me. Each moment felt both inviting and dangerous, drawing me deeper into the darkness. I felt Amy hesitating behind me, and I glanced back, her expression troubled. "I don't like this," she said, her voice quaking. "It feels wrong." "You can feel it too?" I asked, surprised. "I thought it was just me." "Let's just find a way out," she urged, stepping closer. "We can't help them, whatever they are." But part of me couldn't shake the urge to respond to their cries. They sounded so pitiful, trapped in their endless torment. "We have to try," I insisted, gripping her hand tighter. Suddenly, a door swung open to our left, revealing a dark room filled with flickering lights. I hesitated, but the allure of something beyond pushed me inside. The stale air hit my face like a cold slap. The room was cluttered with old hospital equipment, long abandoned. This was a place where hope had once lived, I could tell. Then, without warning, the door slammed shut behind us. I spun around, panic rising. "Amy, the door!" I yelled. But when I turned back, she was already studying a wall filled with faded photographs. "Aiden," she whispered, "look." I stepped closer, my breath catching in my throat. The pictures were of the same people from the whispers, faces filled with despair, frozen in time. They were all patients from this very room, and each one wore a look of desperation. It was like they were calling out from the past, begging to be remembered. One photo caught my eye. A boy, maybe 8 or 9, stared back, eyes wide and pleading. "Who were you?" I wondered aloud. "What happened to you?" As the weight of their stories pressed down on me, I heard the echoes again. "Help us, please." My heart raced, a mix of empathy and fear spiraling within me. But then came the faintest sound, footsteps, echoing from the corridor behind us. They echoed louder, and I froze. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my stomach twisting as dread pooled at the pit of my stomach. "They're coming," Amy said, her eyes wide. "We need to hide." Before I could process her suggestion, the room dimmed further, shadows crawling toward us like fingers reaching from the void. I glanced around for a place to escape, when suddenly I felt a cold breath against my neck. My skin prickled with fear, and I turned slowly to find the boy from the photo standing right in front of me. His face was pale, a shadow of what seemed to have once been life. "Help me," he mouthed, though no sound escaped his lips. I stumbled back, tripping over something on the floor. "What do you want?" I shouted, but my voice trembled. "What happened here?" His eyes widened in desperation as he extended a hand toward me. "Help us." And then the lights flickered and went out completely. I gasped, darkness swallowing all semblance of safety. In that moment of absolute silence, I knew we were not alone anymore. A heavy breathing surrounded us, echoing off the walls. The shadows were coming for us, and I realized this was no longer just about choices. It was about survival. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Amy's wrist and pulling her toward the only exit I saw, the door that had shut behind us. But as I reached it, it wouldn't budge. Something unseen, something sinister, was trapping us in this nightmare. What had I gotten us into? I didn't know, but there was no turning back now. The door rattled against my grip, but my efforts were futile. It felt like an unseen force pressed against it, holding it shut. I turned back towards Amy, who stood there wide-eyed and ghostly pale. "We can't stay here," I said, trying to keep panic from lacing my voice. Suddenly, the lights flickered back to life in brief, jittery bursts. In those moments, I caught glimpses of more fleeting figures, kids darting at the edge of my vision, always just out of reach. Their laughter rang out softly, weaving through the tense air like an eerie melody. It made my skin crawl. Then something shifted behind us. A heavy presence lingered, blocking our way back into the corridor. I glanced at Amy, and in that silent exchange, I saw the fear mirrored in her eyes, the unspoken realization that we had dug ourselves into a deeper hole. "Let's try the windows," I shouted, breaking the stillness around us. I dashed to the nearest one, hoping it wasn't sealed shut. I struggled to slide it open, but it wouldn't budge. "No!" I growled, slamming my palm against the glass in frustration. I glanced over my shoulder. Shadows were creeping closer now, their forms flickering as if they were trying to mold into.
"Aiden!" Amy screamed, her voice breaking. "They're coming!" I turned just in time to see a silhouette, tall and dark, unfolding from the shadows, a face I barely recognized. It was the nurse, but her expression was distorted, bathed in an ominous gloom. "Help!" I heard her voice, raspy and laden with despair. But those eyes, they told a different story. They screamed for us to run. "Go!" she croaked, reaching out towards us. But just as I opened my mouth to respond, the shadows lunged, seamlessly shifting shape as they surged towards her. I pulled Amy back, shielding her instinctively as the figure of the nurse became engulfed in wisps of darkness. "Move!" I yelled, and together we barreled towards the far wall, desperately searching for a crack in the chaos, a way to escape this haunting grasp. Amy grasped my arm, her choice echoing confidence despite the fear that clung to us both. "Over there! The door!" She pointed toward a cracked wooden door in the corner of the room that I'd missed in my panicked state. We raced towards it, each step feeling like the ground could swallow us whole. But when we reached it, the doorknob felt cold beneath my fingers. I hesitated, uncertain of what lay beyond. There was so much I still didn't understand. In that fleeting moment of doubt, a chorus of whispers encircled us, angry, pleading, tortured. "Help us!" they echoed from every corner, a desperate plea that pierced through the chaos. My heart ached for the lost souls trapped here, but at what cost? "Aiden!" Amy's insistence ripped me from my indecision. I twisted the knob with all the strength I could muster and threw the door open, spilling into a poorly lit hallway. We stumbled forward, the shadows spilling through behind us like a black fog, undeterred. We ran, not looking back, the cries of the children filling my ears, both a warning and a lure. They need us. "Stop it! They're after us! We can't save them!" Amy shouted, her breath hitching. "But if they were just kids," I trailed off, torn. Suddenly, we found ourselves at the end of the hall, where a larger set of double doors loomed. An exit? Without thinking, I pushed against them, praying for freedom. But as they creaked open, we were met with an unexpected sight. A stark, sterile waiting room that felt like a hostile unfamiliarity. "Where are we?" Amy whispered, fear palpable in her voice. A soft flickering light illuminated the room, and my heart dropped when I spotted an old radio on the counter. Static crackled through it, mixing with the chaos still surging behind us. I reached for the knobs, desperate to drown out the whispers, desperately flipping through channels. "Help! Us!" they echoed, and the shadows drew closer, swirling ominously behind us. "Aiden, we need to go!" "Wait, just a minute," I insisted, trying to focus on the radio, as if it might hold some clues, some way to understand what had just unfolded. But the voices were becoming deafening.
Now, the shadows forming tendrils that pushed against my resolve. Just as I was about to scream with frustration, a familiar channel flared to life, cutting through the static. "You must choose." The voice was deep and thunderous, echoing through the room. What do you mean?" I gasped, glancing around, half expecting the walls to close in on us. Suddenly, the entire room shifted, shadows retracting momentarily to reveal images flashing before me. Scenes of laughter, families, children running free, the warmth of life dimming into darkness, faces blurred and smashed against an invisible glass, news clippings of disappearances, whispers of broken promises, each pulse of light carrying a heavy weight. "I can't," I gasped, the image of the boy from the photograph snapping clear in my mind. "The promise!" "Choose!" The voice boomed again, and panic surged through me, choking me with its intensity. In a fleeting moment of clarity, I knew this was a cycle of loss. Shadows were just echoes of those who had suffered, children lost in a world that abandoned them. But if we opened the door again, we might face something even worse. "We can't keep running," I shouted, tightening my grip on Amy's arm, my heart racing against the suffocating darkness. And then I ran, dragging her behind me toward the door. We were out of options. We'd settle the score with the darkness once and for all. But as I stepped through the threshold, I turned back, throwing a glimpse into the room. Remorseful faces swarming in the shadows, still pleading for release. "I'm sorry," I screamed, tears challenging the onslaught of fear and uncertainty. "I can't abandon you." The doors slammed shut behind us, sealing whispers inside, leaving us standing in the unsettling silence of the corridor. The air felt heavy, charged, but I knew the question remained unanswered. Had they truly been lost souls, or were they simply manifestations of my own fears? The echo of their cries lingered, a haunting reminder of the choice I made. I wouldn't go back, but would I know peace? As we fled down the corridor, feeling the weight of those lost on my shoulders, the shadows seemed to recede, but continued to whisper. I glanced down at my feet, one step after another, regretting every second as the night settled upon the building once more. I looked at Amy, who shared my haunted gaze. "Did we really get away?" she asked, hesitating. "I don't know." And despite our escape, the answers slipped through my fingers like sand. In the depths of the night, I still heard their pleas, a constant reminder of the choices we made and the legacies we might never understand.